Campaign 2013 is already here, and one of the hottest races might be for mayor of New Haven. John DeStefano is now in his 10th term, the longest-serving mayor in Elm City history. But there are some rumblings he may be challenged for re-election within his own party, and those rumblings are coming from State Representative Gary Holder-Winfield. And Representative Holder-Winfield is with us today, and good to see you in the program.
It's good to see you, Dennis.
So what's the decision? Are you going to run for mayor?
There's no decision yet. I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking seriously about it, but there's not a decision yet. And I guess what kind of happened is I've been asked about this for a while, and my automatic response has been no. But now that I'm thinking about it seriously, what I didn't want to happen was me to say no and then a month later come out and say, well, I'm doing this. I don't think that was appropriate. And so when the paper asked me, I honestly answered, I'm thinking about it, taking a serious look. So that's where we are right now.
It's tough to challenge a sitting mayor within your own party. Have you had any conversations with Mayor DeStefano about this yet?
No, actually, I didn't intend to say anything yet. So I haven't had a conversation with the mayor about it. It's kind of a surprise to me that the story kind of got away from me.
Let's talk about, the mayor's been in office for 20 years. What do you think about that longevity? You think it's too long?
I think we should all consider how long we've been in office. I think Mayor DeStefano has been in office for what I would consider a very long time. I'm not sure that people should be in office for 20 years in the same office, because I think no matter how good you are or how much of an attempt you put at remaining connected to people, there's a certain level of disconnect. I've been in the State House for 4 years. I feel as though I'm more disconnected from people than I would like to be honest with you. And I think I make a strong attempt to stay in contact with people. So I think it happens as you're in office. And I think sometimes you're unable to hear people say to you that you're not connected to people.
What are some of the things in the way that the mayor runs the city that you disagree with?
I think the thing that we just talked about hearing people is important. So in New Haven, the mayor has said, if you read the stories about this potential run, the mayor said that the discussion is going to be about education, crime in the downtown area. For years, there were people talking about education in the city of New Haven. And the mayor is going to talk about education reform, and particularly, they've gotten a lot of credit about the deal that they made with the unions. But for a number of years, they could not hear that we needed to do what I think they're now saying we need to do with education. That's a problem, because in the interim, we're failing our children. In terms of crime, there was a point at which the mayor said we didn't have a reentry problem. I think anybody who looks at the city of New Haven knows that we've always had, or at least for a very long time, have had this issue of reentry. And so one of the differences is, I think, first of all, I was one of the people saying on both issues that we had an issue. And one of the things that's different is I think I connect to people in a different way.
And by reentry, what do you mean, just for those of you?
Issues with those people who have gone to prison and who are now returning to the community and dealing with all of the issues that are concomitant with having been in prison.
As a New Haven resident, do you think the city is safer now than it was 2 years ago, or not?
I think the city is a relatively safe city. I think there's been a lot of discussion about New Haven, and with the report that came out, whether they were the fourth most dangerous city. I think that report was misinterpreted. But again, the issue is that we have people coming back. The city is getting better about dealing with those people. But for a long time, when we could have been dealing with those people, when some people, my predecessor and myself, and some other activists in the city were saying that there was an issue with reentry, the city was blind to it.
You mentioned that you believe that 20 years might be too long. Do you believe it's too long for Rosa DeLauro, who's also served about the same amount of time?
I think, in general, being in office for 20 years is a very long time. I love what Rosa DeLauro does. I think she's great. I just happen to think that if I'm in an office, I don't think I will be in any office for 20 years.
But do you think it's a good thing for other politicians to do it, or no?
Again, I'm not going to say what's best for them. I think that no matter how much you try to be in contact with people, it's very difficult. And I think as an individual, I don't think I need to be in office for 20 years. I would hope that when I'm in office, there's also succession planning on my part, and that I've done something to help someone else come behind me to do the type of job I'm doing.
Let's talk about this run for mayor, this potential run for mayor. What's the process that you have to go through now, and when would you decide?
So the process that I'm going to go through is I'm going to form an exploratory committee in relatively short order, go out to the people in the city, talk to them. I've heard people say to me they want me to run. I need to get beyond that group of people. I don't want it to be about a group of people who just like me, who want me to run, and hear what people have to say and see how they respond to me. And if I get positive response, a broad enough positive response, then probably sometime towards the beginning of February, I would launch an official campaign committee.
So the exploratory campaign will begin any day now, or is it the type of thing just
I need to file a paperwork, but I'm hoping to have the paperwork done sometime next week.
And then you can start raising money if
Yes.
you'd like hire people to help you raise money and to do polling and things like that. What do you? Well, obviously you think the mayor is beatable, otherwise you wouldn't be challenging him.
I think any of us are beatable.
Do you think you might scare him off from running again?
I wouldn't bet on that. I just wouldn't. I think John DeStefano is a person who looks at the city of New Haven, thinks he's done a great job, and in many respects he's done a good job, and thinks he deserves another term. And if I were John DeStefano, the way that I understand him, I probably wouldn't be scared by my campaign.
How would you rate the educational system in the city of New Haven right now? Grades A through F.
I would say it's probably right now C+, getting better, but it wasn't always there. I would imagine that my potential opponent would tell you that that's completely wrong. But I think there's a lot of things in the city of New Haven that still need to improve where education is concerned, and in the state, which is why it's been one of my major issues.
Let's shift gears, talk about the state capitol a little bit, because you got a lot of work on your plate up there. Everybody does. The budget deficit. How would you solve the budget deficit?
How would I solve the budget?
If the governor said, you know, Representative Holder-Winfield, how do I do it? What would you tell him?
You know, I don't know that any of us actually know the answer, the silver bullet to that. To be honest with you, I don't think any of us do. I think we have to go in, look at where we are. We're late in the process to have a deficit that's as large as it is. And as Comptroller Kevin Limbo said, you know, the discretionary part of the budget is very small. Yeah. And particularly when you're late in the process, there's less that you can do with it. And so I think it's really not even a matter of what's your natural prescription if we were starting off at the beginning of the process. It's really taking a look at where we are and what we can do at this point. And I haven't done that yet. And the legislature hasn't really done that yet, at least in terms of the deficit we're looking at. So it's a thing where the Appropriations Committee, the governor, and the leadership have to get together, look at what we're doing, and figure out what we can do.
Would you support any tax hikes at all?
You know, I'm never going to foreclose the concept of a tax hike. I don't think it's the first thing we should be doing. I agree with those who say that we need to look at what we're doing. I think we always need to do a better job of looking at what we're doing. We have a process at the state capitol, a results-based accountability process. I think it's a great thing. I've been critical of it over the years because I don't think that we've done a good job with it. I think it's a powerful tool that can help us with the budget. We haven't used it well. And so that's where I would come down on that.
Obviously, you know, cuts will have to be made here and there. From your vantage point at the state capitol as a state lawmaker, do you see any waste in government right now that you'd like to see wiped out?
I think we can always look at what we're doing, and I think over the course of time, as I've been on the Appropriations Committee, we have a subcommittee process where we look at each individual budget. And I think we found places where I don't know if I would call it waste, but where we haven't been as careful as we should be. Some people would call that waste. And I think we need to continue to do that. And I think when those people who run these agencies come before us, we need to be a little tougher on them than we have been. A couple of years ago, I had an interaction with Commissioner McQuillan, who was at the time the Education Commissioner, with the RBA process. And it seemed that he had done a great job, but when I finished questioning him, because I'm a little more critical than some with this process, he actually apologized for having not come to us with the appropriate data. So I think you can talk about waste, or you can talk about the process. I think that legislators need to be very serious. It's not our money that we're playing with. It's the money of the people who elect us to come to the State House, and we've got to be very careful with it.
What are your constituents saying to you about this budget deficit? You know, a lot of people saying to me, hey, they raised taxes last year. Yeah. How can this be?
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, and that's exactly the feedback that we're getting. And, you know, some of my constituents, like I would guess the constituents of many legislators, are very upset. And they're confused about how this is possible. You know, we say, look, let us have this process. We do the process we have at the Capitol, and we're putting out to you a budget that's going to work, and then it doesn't work. it doesn't matter what happened. The people of the state look at us and say, you're not doing what you need to do. It doesn't, you can try to explain it to them. You can try to explain what's happened with revenues coming and all of that. They don't want to hear that. They want to know that you have a budget that works. And I'm getting that from my constituents. And I'm getting from some constituents who understand it a little bit better. I understand what are you going to do about it, asking questions. But that is kind of a mixed reaction.
State Representative Gary Holder-Winfield, Democrat of New Haven, we appreciate you being on the program. Best luck at the Capitol and best of luck in the quest to become mayor. Thank you.